I'm one of 5 children in our family, and there are many great advantages to having siblings, because in some ways you kind of always have someone to play with or hang out with. You have someone to talk to about mom and dad. You have developed that whole bank of common stories that when you become an adult are kind of fun to look back on and laugh about. One of the other great things about having siblings is I think most every family targets probably the youngest one, and at some point in their life they try to convince them that they were actually adopted. We did this to our youngest brother, Rick. And we would say, like, well, Rick, there are 5 of us. Look at all of our baby pictures. You're the only one who had curly hair. You have to be adopted. And he'd say, no, I am not adopted. And I would say, well, remember that day when the UPS driver was at the end of his route and he had this box and he couldn't read the address, and so he just dropped it at our corner and we brought you in and took care of you. You are adopted. No, I'm not, but you could see you were starting to kind of break through a little bit. And so then you would say, we had a heavy rain one day. And we lived on a hill, and so boy, that water just came rushing down the gutter, and you came floating by, so we grabbed you and brought you in the house, and you've been here ever since. You are adopted. And he'd go, no, Mom, am I adopted? We'd go, yes. We created just enough doubt that he had to go ask and make sure that he knew that he wasn't adopted. He was loved from the beginning. Now, that doesn't have to say anything to say about people who are adopted, because that's a blessing in and of itself. But a way of just creating that little bit of doubt to enter in, to make him wonder if he was as loved as we were, if he was as wanted as we were. That doubt is something that can be a temptation, that can be an obstacle too for us in our path of discipleship, and we see that in our readings today. In our first reading, we have the familiar story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And this is where God has told them, you can eat from any of these trees except the one in the center. That is the tree of knowledge. And so they're going about the garden, and of course the tempter then comes and says, you can eat from that tree in the middle. And they say, well, God said not to. But you know why God said that? God does not want you to be as knowledgeable as he is. God does not want you to be as powerful as he is. If you eat from that fruit, you will be just like God. And that temptation, that doubt enters in where they go, God was wrong. We do want to be like God. We do want to eat from that fruit. And so they do. They succumb to that doubt that was triggered in their minds. Jesus, however, does not give in to that doubt. He has fasted for 40 days in the desert, and the devil comes to tempt him in 3 different ways, and they kind of spar back and forth with Scripture. And the devil is trying to say to him, you can have all of this power, all of these people under your feet. You can have everything that you want. You can be the wisest, the most powerful, the person in charge of everything, if you will just bow down and worship me. And Jesus says that's not what it's about. It's about recognizing that God is the center of everything, that God is the one who invites us on that path to discipleship, that it is God that we follow as we figure out our faith journey. And so Jesus pushes aside that doubt and that temptation. And friends, I think for each of us on our path to discipleship, there possibly have been times when that temptation to doubt God, to doubt others has come in. Maybe we have even doubted the fact that we truly are made in God's image and likeness, that each one of us has the divine in us, that each one of us is holy. We might want to instead say, well, if you really knew me, or, we can't be like God, and yet we're made in God's image and likeness. So we're not to let that doubt take over. Or we might doubt our own giftedness, our own, the talents that we have. And we might be too shy in wanting to share them. We might want to negate them a little bit for fear that we'll look like we're proud or we're bragging. And yet God has given us those gifts to be used for the good of all people. And so again, can we push aside the doubt that maybe we are not as gifted as others, or we are not as gifted as God sees us, we are not as gifted as others see us? Sometimes that doubt can enter into our relationships. Maybe something is said, something is done, there's some distance that comes in, and we can begin to doubt the strength of that relationship. We can begin to doubt how committed we are, either in marriage or in friendship. And again, the call is for us not to allow that doubt to take over, but to recognize the goodness in the relationships and the friendships that we have. And again, maybe the doubt that enters in is that God can't really fully forgive us. And yet we know that no matter what we do, we cannot earn God's love and forgiveness, nor can we remove it from our lives. And so, friends, as we enter into this first week of Lent, as we listen to these readings, let us look at those areas in life where perhaps we have allowed some doubt to enter in, and to ask God to help us remove that obstacle so that we may be more fully on that path to discipleship.